because man's task is to make the earth after the model of heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Man's project is to heavenize the earth. Man is made to transform the world from glory to glory, to take hold of it and break it down and remake it after the image of heaven.
Welcome back to the Reformed Reset. We are a part of Take Hold Studios. My name is Grant, and joined with me is my beautiful wife, Erica, the weaker vessel.
Hello, everyone.
And as you can see, we have two beautiful guests with us. This is Jake and Eryn Lajoie. Guys, welcome to the Reformed Reset.
Thanks for having us. Asking us to come.
To get this out of the way first, please like the video, subscribe to the channel so that way you get notified whenever we put out anything new. We greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, takeholdstudios.com. There's a link for merch in the description, so we have some things coming out, and there'll be more added. We'll keep talking about it as we go, but the link is there, so go check it out. It would support us a ton if you buy something. That'd be awesome. And the podcast is on all the audio feeds, iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher. I don't know what else. If there's one that you listen to podcasts on and we're not on there, let me know so I can make sure we're on there. But I try to get it everywhere, and so far we're doing pretty good. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything else admin-wise to get out of the way. That's pretty much it. All of you that do like and comment, thank you so much. That helps a ton. Obviously, YouTube and other places will push videos with a bunch of likes and comments to the top because that's getting traction, so that helps us.
Yep.
So anyway, definitely appreciate that. Tonight is a special interview. We are digging into all of the deep secrets that Jake and Eryn have. Just kidding.
Special interview.
Oh man, no, so
You would not believe the strings we had to pull to get them here.
it's true. They're people, they're
really
publicists. Yeah. We know now. Their publicist is not easy to work with.
No.
Gosh, that was ridiculous. Months in the works. But we finally got them on. We just took the handcuffs off. We had to kidnap them, get
Pretty
them
much.
here. And anyway, so we're going to talk about theological journeys. Should we spill it at the beginning or leave them on the edge?
No, we gotta just
You're
do
probably
it. It's
gonna
gonna
have
be
a
in the
video
title.
named. I was
yeah.
gonna say.
Nah, in the title.
That's true. All right, so you guys are freshly Paedobaptist.
Yes.
Correct.
And so we want to talk about that journey. That was a journey Erica and I traveled a few years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And we just got here to Maine and have met you guys and got to know you and your children. This will be out, after the fact, but your children will have received the sign of the covenant.
This Sunday, right?
Next Sunday.
Next
I just
Sunday.
talked to Pastor Boland
Okay.
today.
All right. This means
So
nothing to you guys.
No,
Whenever you watch
no,
this,
timeline
dates,
means nothing.
So, yeah.
dates matter not.
So it'll be August by the time this goes out. So.
Pretty much.
August 8th.
All right.
Will be the date
Okay.
of their baptism.
Yeah.
So anyway, but you guys have recently come to this conviction.
Yep.
And so we wanted to talk about kind of your theological journey because just like us a few years ago, there are many Reformed Baptists or just whoever, right? Reformed couples asking this question, should my kids get baptized or not? And so we wanted to walk through that and hopefully help any of you all out there who have the same questions. So anyway, why don't you guys share a little bit about, I guess, how long you've been married and where you were at theologically when you got married, and either one of you can answer.
So we've been married for 6 years. May was our 6-year anniversary.
Awesome.
Not much has changed. Most of our changes happened before we got married. Except for the baptism thing, obviously, is
That's the biggest change. Since
is
we've
very
been married,
recent.
For sure.
Okay.
We both grew up in the standard, small B Baptist, Arminian, evangelical, pre-trib, pre-mill, dispensational.
There are many victims.
Grew up reading.
We're all
reading the Left Behind books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both grew up in very similar households in that regard.
Okay.
So.
So I've always been kind of a theology geek. I got my first Schofield, old Schofield study Bible when I was...
Is that the chain reference one? Or Schofield chain reference Bible? That's a
Thomas Nelson does the chain reference one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I had the old Schofield.
Yeah, that's like legit.
The original. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Got the
it's
seven
like OG
different
dispensational.
Yeah. So, where was I?
That was in high school.
You were talking about
Yeah, so I was like 14 probably when I got that, and that's when I
Okay.
kind of got interested in studying theology. My dad was going to seminary at Liberty.
Okay.
At the time, and I would watch a lot of his stuff with him,
Okay.
and he would give me some of his like hand-me-down books if it was a textbook that
cool.
he maybe had
Kind
more
of.
than one
Nice.
copy of. Or so I was very anti-Calvinist, not just like I wasn't one. I was like very like
because they were
against it. Liberty. Oh yeah,
Liberty was
too.
Do you remember Ergen Cantor?
Yes. Why I'm predestined not to be a Calvinist. I loved that sermon when it first came out.
Yeah.
I listened to some of it now and think, how did I ever agree with this?
It's nonsense.
But I got to senior year of high school, and I had one credit left to graduate, so I had a pretty easy senior year.
Nice.
This was right around the time that we started dating. It was
the summer before, actually.
Summer before.
Before.
Senior year.
Or was it?
I remember...
My senior year ended before we started dating, so yeah, it was before we got...
Yeah. We started dating right after.
Who usually remembers dates better?
Me.
He remembers dates better. I remember general time frames better. He remembers dates better.
I'm a horrible gauge of time, too. Something will have happened 2 months ago, and I'm like, wasn't that like a few years ago? But surprisingly, I'm better at personal dates than that.
But yeah, so your senior year.
So senior year, I needed one credit to graduate, and I got to do a theology class.
Oh, wow.
So I had a systematic theology textbook that my dad had given me just to read through for the year. That was my whole schoolwork. Yeah. And I had a workbook that I filled out, and he gave me 2 big writing assignments, one at the end of each semester. So the first one was around Christmas, so he picked the virgin birth for me as the topic. And the one at the end of the year, he said I could pick anything I wanted. So I picked Calvinism.
Ah, okay.
And the paper would probably be super cringy now if I read it.
But you thought you were settling the debate for history, right? For all of time.
Right. So I was always into Charles Spurgeon even before, so that was kind of like my only like frame of reference. So I had some quotes from him for like the other side, but it was a 4-point Arminian, an Arminian with assurances. That's the way I like to put it. And it started almost daily study of Calvinism for about a year and a half, and it was a very slow. I didn't have any kind of like eye-popping moments, but it was just a very 4-point Arminian to like still that, but more sympathetic to don't really know what I think to all of a sudden I found myself arguing with Arminian people when I would listen to them. And about a year and a half later, I was a full-blown 5-pointer, kind of like and without even.
A lot of this was going on.
You're dating, right?
But I didn't know about any of this.
Yeah.
So I didn't know he was studying. I knew that he was into theology and he'd study a lot, but I didn't know that he was having this like mindset change.
Closet Calvinist.
Yeah. So
I very much.
You were a closet Calvinist, and how long were we dating? Like a year. It wasn't very long.
It was probably
year and a half.
A year and a half.
That seems long.
So we had been dating for a while, and we were going to this church for a while, and there was some I want to say it was on the way home from church at one point.
No, it was one night at my house. We were talking about
we were talking about just like
life and relationships,
destiny, and how
she had mentioned something about God's plan B or whatever, something like that. I just said, I'm like, there's no plan B. I'm like, God doesn't have plan Bs. God just has a plan.
And
she looked at me and said, "What?" Like very dismissively, "What are you, a Calvinist?" And I just got very quiet, very kind of sheepish looking.
Yeah.
And she started like crying and laughing at the same time.
Yeah.
She's like,
it was a big. My parents were probably even more vehemently like anti-Calvinist than even his parents were. So I kind of I didn't really know what it was.
You
really,
just knew it was from the devil.
I knew that it was. I knew that only dumb people believe that.
Oh,
only conceited and dumb people believe
Like drugs,
Calvinism.
alcohol,
That's
Calvinism.
right.
Right.
Which
Don't do that.
But she knew I wasn't conceited or dumb.
Right.
So it was kind of like a
This
crisis.
was confusing.
Right.
Right. So for me, what happened after that point was, there was an emotional turmoil for a little bit, just kind of trying to come to terms with, how that the change.
We had several conversations over the coming months. It almost always ended in like hysterical crying.
I was a
gonna
pretty
make Eryn
emotional.
hysterically crying.
Yes. No, I
I
wasn't the one hysterically
was just a very emotional person, and I just have, I am a very emotional person, so I had a hard time.
You were 18? 17?
You would have been 17.
I would have been
almost
17.
18.
I was grappling
who
a
isn't?
lot with it. Yeah. I was grappling a lot with it, because, I've told him before, it's like, I know that you're not dumb. So how do you believe
this dumb thing?
How do you believe this dumb thing? So my main goal at the time was to have him just explain to me, like, why do you think this? Because I need to understand why you think this, even if I'm never going to agree with you, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so where his situation was more of like a slow build, where he kind of just came to the position, I had a very like abrupt change. So it was a course of like about 3 months from finding out that he was a Calvinist to completely becoming one myself.
But I kind of went through the whole process calmly because I was in my own
You
head,
were in your own
reading
head.
and listening to things.
Yeah, so after discussions
and
with
hers
him...
was more convulsive.
Yeah, so
because of me.
after discussions with him and discussions with some other people that we knew, I started to just kind of wrestle with it. And I would say that the big change, and this is pivotal in my life, which will come into play later, was I came to the decision, I'm like, okay, I need to get rid of all of my presuppositions about what I was raised as, and I need to look at the Bible from its source and what it says, because I already know I believe the Bible. What the Bible says, I believe, even if it's something I'm not comfortable with.
Right.
And that was the big switch for me. So when I had those conversations, and instead of being hyper emotional about it and trying to fight against it, and I don't like this, how can I ever have children, all these terrible thoughts. Once I kind of got rid of all that and just said, okay, I need to re-examine this, just, what the Bible says, I believe. Let's look at this from the ground up. And there was one night where, even though I wasn't super comfortable with it, I just realized, I'm like, I can't deny this anymore. And I believe that I just said, I'm like, I guess I'm a Calvinist. And it was just kind of a very interesting change, but it changed a lot for me.
Yeah.
You had a better time when other people talked to you about it. That
Yeah,
we were
it
friends
was too.
with.
It was a little emotionally charged.
It felt too personal with me.
It was
Probably.
too significant.
I remember that though. I never want to have children if this is true. That type
Which
of thing.
is just silly looking back on it now.
But yeah, I didn't have the joke about the cage stage Calvinist. I was too behind enemy lines to have that luxury. I was too I definitely had the stereotype of that's all people talk or study for that was my cage stage, because it was all I studied for 2 or 3 years. But as far as the being really belligerent and I didn't have that luxury, because everyone around us was very
we were both in enemy
against,
territory.
I
didn't really have
so my
cage
dad
stage
found
either.
out, because I bought myself Charles Hodge's Systematic Theology, and my dad just kind of put 2 and 2 together. And then you found out shortly after that.
Came out of the closet.
Yeah,
and then
sign.
and then your parents didn't find out for
We kept it a secret for quite a while.
Not even that
funny.
long ago. A few,
They found out
It
right
was after
before
we
we
were
had.
married.
They found out right before we had our first kid.
Yeah.
Because
it was probably a good 4.5, 5 years after she found out.
I kept
We
it in the
told her.
closet from my
Yeah.
parents for a while.
We started to feel guilty about it, because it felt like lying after a certain point, where it would come up and we just kind of we wouldn't say anything.
We just
And then we felt like we had to rip the Band-Aid off.
rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
Especially because we knew we would be having children soon, and we didn't want that to be,
Right.
Yeah.
a problem.
Just on the Calvinist thing, I took a year and a half, probably 2, and I purposefully did not cage stage, because I had friends that did, and I was like, dude, you've lost your mind. You literally can't
So you
talk.
saw how obnoxious they were, and
Right.
you didn't want to be that
And
way.
I was like, I do not want to be that. But it still had that massive impact, you're talking
Yeah.
about. It did change the way I read the Bible.
Yeah.
In a good way,
It
right?
changes
was,
everything.
And
yeah.
it was like...
yeah, you see it everywhere.
You see
What's
it.
your...
Yeah, you see everything in new colors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then covenant theology does the same thing.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so
does.
then you get married. Now you're both Calvinists, and you're studying along. Now it's been a few years. So what led you, or were there any significant events that led you up to questioning your baptismal theology?
I would say your first step to getting there was you started studying a lot about eschatology, and you hadn't settled on anything yet. But it was a conversation that we had been like having a lot, and we knew that we weren't dispensational.
Everyone who grows up dispensational is interested in eschatology, if nothing
Right.
else. Even if you end up somewhere completely else. Like when you read all the I didn't read all of them, but when you read as many Left Behind books as I did,
I saw the movie.
and have with Kirk Cameron.
Oh, yeah,
Did you see the Nicolas Cage one a few years ago?
I did.
I actually
I
haven't
didn't,
seen the
no.
Nicolas Cage one.
No?
yet.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, so
It's just
you
as awful.
you started studying a lot more about eschatology, trying to come to like where your new opinion was, and the way that I study is by talking to you, because I'm not a very good reader. So we have discussions, and that's where I get my study from. I'll watch like debates and videos.
She
and
just
stuff.
listens to me talk for a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So
Look, I have to work some
Good.
stuff out, and I'll just go on like a 40-minute diatribe where she just kind of
Right.
like nods her
So
head.
I changed my mind on dispensationalism before you did. I admitted right away that was not consistent with,
It took me a
Calvinist
while.
Is there
theology.
anything specific that was made it clear?
So for me, it was when I had been growing up, there was a lot of the
The two peoples of God idea.
there was growing up, the Old Testament and the New Testament were two very distinct, very different ways of God dealing with people.
Right.
And that's what I was told growing up a lot.
Right.
When I became a Calvinist and started rereading a lot of the Old Testament, I realized it's not that it's not different.
Yeah.
The way that God deals with his people is the same. And when I started reading more about, in the New Testament about the things like, that we're Israel or no longer Israel, and that, being,
Right.
the olive
Yeah.
tree and being cut off and grafted on,
Right.
it all just kind of clicked to me, and
Yeah.
it wasn't a hard transition for me at all, because I'm like, well, this is consistent with my
Right.
new Calvinist theology,
Yeah.
because the New Testament is the fulfillment of the Old rather than a completely separate. Well, God is
Then a
different
plan
now.
B.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a plan B, and so that's where my major switch came into play.
I've always joked that I'm jealous of her. She's been able to like come to these really big theological changes way faster and with way less like turmoil than I have.
Right.
I always joke that I'm doing all the heavy lifting because I'll do all the reading and debate listening, and she just has like a few conversations while doing the dishes. Just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get that, and she'll just completely change her mind on something. It took me like months or years,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so I would say that played a big part.
She changed on the baptism thing too. Before
Yeah.
I did, so.
I would say that played a big part in our in the talk of the baptism stuff. So because of us studying eschatology and everything, and the whole post-mill stuff, and you happen to find our church via that way.
Kenneth Gentry's website, postmillennialworldview.com.
Right. Okay.
Under the list of post-mill churches.
This
Well, it has
church.
a disclaimer that churches with post-mill pastors. This was
Okay.
the only church in Maine listed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and we weren't hardcore like post-mill at the time. It was just kind of what we were.
I was leaning
We were
that
leaning
way
that way.
because obviously I'm on postmillennialworldview.com in the first place. So, I got into Kenneth Gentry more because of like studying the preterism
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. The early date of.
Right.
Yeah.
And and he's obviously very post-mill too, and he's got You Shall Have Dominion.
Right.
That was a pretty.
Did you
pretty
read
big
that?
one. I've read some of it. I haven't read all of it. I'm
I don't
terrible
own
at
it.
finishing books.
He's one of those that I'm like, I want your books, but they're so big. And
I've been waiting for his Revelation commentary for like 6 years. So
I think he is too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that would be great when it comes out.
Yeah, so we found this church on that website. Mm-hmm. Looked it up because I had no idea where Oakland was. So I came home one day. I'm like, how far would you go?
Oakland, Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Oakland, California.
Let it be known.
And I said, how long do you think is like, what's a reasonable drive for a good church? Because obviously if it's 2.5 hours away, that's not realistic.
Yeah, so he asked me what I'd be
and
willing
she's like,
to drive.
probably an hour. And I said, it's 45 minutes. So
You're like, yes.
yeah. So we started and we visited just ourselves the first time, and then we visited the second time with our kids. Mm-hmm. And
it was a really good fit right away
Yeah.
because we wanted a family integrated church. We
Yep.
wanted it ticked basically every box, except we were like, well, they're
We're
Presbyterian
Baptists
and we're Reformed
right.
Baptists, so
Right.
that was the only.
I've got a YouTube
thing.
channel name called 5 Point Spurgeonist. I've got 1689 still and like 12 different passwords that I use for places.
That's so funny.
So
You can change passwords.
yeah,
You're good.
it's easy to remember. I might just keep them. You know?
It's got to be
it's your
1646 now.
Ebenezer.
Yeah.
You just backed up. 1646 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So we were very, we're Reformed Baptists, and I've always been a big fan of, James White. James White is, on a human level, is the main reason I became a Calvinist, because he has a lot of material out there.
Me too.
So I listened to his Dividing Lines, his Radio Free Genevas, and watched his debates. And,
So it's funny, he's an influence in me too, becoming a Calvinist, because it's not because I read any of his books or listened to any of his podcasts, but because he is who Norman Geisler engaged with in his book Chosen But Free. And so he was quoting James White all the time in his book. And when I read that book, trying to stack ammo against my Calvinist friends, I just realized that
that's a bad book to read, to stack ammo against Calvinism.
Hey, God's sovereign.
With
right?
all due respect to Norman
You
Geisler, who's
realized
probably
that the
smarter
ammo
than
on
I
the
am,
other
that's
side was
not
better.
that's not the best.
But I read all of James White's explanations for these certain verses and stuff, and I was like, this Calvinist makes way more sense. Anyway, so James White, in an indirect way,
So was it hard for you guys, being Baptist, to go to a Presbyterian church?
Not really. No.
Some people might have harder,
Some
more
people can't
conviction,
get
I
over
guess,
it,
where they feel very strongly about, well, the church has to follow exactly what I do.
Yeah.
That's not how we were. The things that we agreed on were far more important than what we disagreed with.
Right.
So that's kind of where the biggest thing for us was, I guess, being accepted, where we were kind of like, well, we're not gonna, which is one of the questions that you asked when we were Reformed Baptists. We're like, well, can we still become members?
Before we even visited,
Right.
Because I didn't want to waste my waste my time. I said
Waste
not to
your
get ahead of
45 minutes.
myself, but can
we be-
non-Presbyterians become members because we're Baptists?
100%.
And he said, yes, obviously.
Which is interesting because, growing up in the way that we did with the evangelical Baptists and stuff, I feel like they're less open to having members.
No, it's true. It's sad.
Other theological
Reformed
beliefs.
Baptists are far less ecumenical than other Reformed
in a
people.
good way.
Yes, ecumenical in a good way.
Ecumenism, can be really bad, but yes, and that's why I like the term the Reformed Catholicity.
Yep.
Right. That's like a common term thrown around in the CREC and places where we understand that within the Reformed faith or within a formed church, there's a lot of different views.
Yep.
The Reformed movement in and of itself had 4 different branches that had distinctives different. So it's okay. We can accept you and understand there's differences.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, so
especially for membership.
Yeah. So we became members after probably like 5 or 6 weeks, and just because, honestly, if we hadn't started coming here, I probably never would have thought to look at it.
Okay.
If we had a Reformed Baptist church 5 minutes from our house that we liked, it probably would have just started going there and
business
never
as usual.
Right.
Yeah.
And because it was never. Yeah, it was just never something I thought about. It was just kind of one of those things you took for granted. Like, this is what's normal.
It's the same for us.
Yeah,
for
it's how you're
years.
raised, and you just don't think to question
Yeah.
I mean,
it.
as recently as our youngest being born, less than a year ago, when somebody asked me, like, oh, are they being baptized? I said, no, I'm not Catholic.
Yeah.
So that's
I would have said the same thing.
And both of our fathers came out of Rome.
Yes.
Both of our fathers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we kind of had that.
You have
that prejudice kind of built into it already.
You have that second generation anti-Catholic that we had.
That's like the Anabaptist Zwingli. Sorry, I'm taking a church history class right now. Like literally, their whole motto was, "Oh, do Catholics do it? Yeah, then I don't do it."
Yeah,
it's like just complete opposite.
Threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So I would say,
and then some.
When we started, when we became members, and you started buying books and material and you said something to me, we just started a conversation about it, and I said something flippant, which just sounds silly now, where I'm just like, oh, well, I would never change my mind on that, because they clearly have it all wrong, because, well, baptism is And I stopped for a second and I realized I don't know what baptism is.
Oh,
Because as a Calvinist, under my new mentality, it doesn't make sense to say, well, this is an outward display of an inward faith.
You.
It makes it all about you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I realized
And
that
your decision.
right, and my decision. So I realized that the view of baptism that I was raised on doesn't jive,
Wasn't
and
even
I didn't
Calvinist.
realize until that moment, until I said it out loud, I don't know what baptism is.
Yeah.
And so you read a ton.
Yeah.
We had tons of discussions about
Can we
it.
throw out some
I didn't get-
resources here? What did you read?
Yeah, so I read, I'll stick with the ones I'd recommend. So,
Fine.
Word, Water,
Good choice.
Spirit by
I've
J.B.
re-
Fesko.
I've read that.
Was
Very
really,
good
really
book.
good.
Yeah, very good
Reformation Heritage books, which I couldn't recommend more.
There'll be a
to the
link. I'll put a
audience.
link.
Yeah.
I'll put a link.
Reformation
It'll be an
Heritage
affiliate
books.
link. We make money if you click on it and buy something. I have to
So-
tell you that.
Jake, you get 5%.
Yeah, that was really good. The case for
More than what we're paying them already to come on.
the case
Jeez,
for
babe.
covenantal infant baptism, which was edited by Greg Strawbridge.
Yeah, okay. I haven't read
is
that
really
one.
good.
That's good.
2000.
That's got several authors, right?
Yeah, each chapter is it's like a series. It's a book of essays.
Could you
basically.
name some of the names with the,
I think.
if you remember?
I think Douglas Wilson was one of the chapters. Greg
Okay.
Strawbridge himself was one of the
Wrote a
chapters.
few or something.
Joel Beakey
Okay.
from Reformation Heritage
Yeah.
Books was one.
Is there
Peter
Lust
Lightheart.
or Lightheart? Okay.
Peter
Yep.
Lightheart was on one.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
remember every name, but those were some of them. So
Good.
that was a good one. To 1,000 Generations by Douglas Wilson. That
I
was
haven't read that, but
that's
yeah.
a pretty good. It's short and not really
Yeah.
that complicated. It has a very focused.
So
It does the circumcision thing. That's kind of the whole point
Yeah.
of the book. So that's a good introduction.
nice.
And I read a couple of small books on the mode of
Yep.
baptism. So Meaning and Mode of Baptism by
Yeah,
Jay
we
Adams.
changed our
Oh,
mind
okay.
on
For
the
me,
mode.
completely killed the whole immersion only thing. Like it's
Yeah.
only like 60 pages long, and he just completely tears it to shreds.
Does
Yeah,
he
we-
get
we-
into the Greek a lot? Is that why?
Not
Or no?
not a ton. It's very accessible. I have like a less than paper thin knowledge of Greek, and I.
But his
understood all of
argumentation
it, so-
wasn't from the Greek.
Well,
or?
it was in
Okay,
the
yeah.
the Hebrews 9, the various washings. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
so it gets into
All
it a
the
little
word,
bit.
same word, right?
But-
All
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and then just lists several different types of sprinkling done in the it
Yeah,
uses the
after
term the same
you
Greek
read
term
that-
for
Yeah.
baptism.
After you read that, we changed our mind on the mode. Before
Yeah, the
we
mode
actually came around.
the
to-
mode fell very
Interesting.
fast.
Yeah.
I didn't, which I also didn't think would ever happen. I'm like sprinkling. My analogy was sprinkling for baptism is like wine, is like grape juice for communion. Like, it counts,
yeah.
but not really. Kind of thing.
It's like horseshoes. Like it
Right,
counts,
yeah.
but it really didn't
Yeah.
get around the.
Your heart was in the
That's
right
so
place,
funny.
but it's deficient, kind of thing.
That's good.
We changed,
So-
but that changed pretty quickly.
Yeah, those would be the main ones.
So
I'd
I'll
recommend.
put. So I want to do that. I want to put links for people, so if they happen to catch this, they can click on that, order it, buy it, and hopefully that helps them. So
And most books about baptism mention the mode at least a little bit.
yeah.
But that's the Meaning and Mode of Baptism by Jay Adams. That's all it's about.
Yeah,
It doesn't even argue for infant
Yeah.
baptism at all. It's exclusively about
Yeah,
immersion
and I would-
versus sprinkling and pouring.
I would say Fesko's book, like, we were brand new Presbyterian, and when you became members at our PCA church in North Carolina,
Don't hold that against us.
it was a good one.
It
Still
was,
a good one.
Yes.
And Cross Creek Presbyterian, I'll shout you out. It's good.
It was one of the only
Fantastic,
good
yeah.
PCAs left.
But anyway, when you became a new member, the pastor gave you a book from the book table. And so I was like, Word, Water, Spirit. I saw it there already, and I was like, I gotta read this.
Yeah, that was
And
really,
then-
really good.
I got sent to Africa for a month, remember? And I read the whole thing in that couple of weeks.
So
of training.
for
It's really
like the
good.
stay-at-home moms who have a harder time reading, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Especially if you have little kids, time is short and you're busy. So were there podcasts or
Something more accessible.
something that would be simpler
Sure.
for?
I'm really bad at thinking of things.
I listen to a lot of YouTube.
You listen
Yeah,
to
So
a lot
yeah.
of
on
YouTube.
like 1.5
Yeah.
speed because theologians drone on.
Yeah, I would say
long.
finding one
That's
of the
really
things
funny.
that always helps
True.
me a lot is debates in general. So
Did you watch the James White Strawbridge debate?
Yes,
Reverend
I
Dr.
did.
Strawbridge. That's
Reverend
what I
Dr.
call him every time
Strawbridge. Yes,
every time
that's
I
a really good
mention
one.
his name.
The James
Yeah.
White Reverend Dr. Strawbridge
Yep.
debate is a really good one.
It is a good one.
And just honestly, like, YouTube videos, there was one, like,
anything Douglas Wilson on pretty much any topic,
fantastic.
I highly recommend.
Yeah.
So
and even just, I'll have to find it, but there's even, like, one just very short, like, 8-minute condensed video that just kind of walked through baptism that I specifically saved to show my parents, to explain to them why I'm not Catholic. So I was just like, because I'm like, okay, well, you know, when we become Paedobaptist, like, I'm gonna have to explain to them, by the way, I am not Catholic, because my dad is, you know, anyway.
That's funny.
You know, love you. But, so,
we had that conversation.
I still have that conversation with family.
I would say, like, you know, YouTube is a great resource to find basically anything.
Maybe that would be a good thing to put out, right?
James White did another debate with Bill Shishko. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was another good one.
Yeah, that one was good. I watched that one too because Shishko goes into the deeper meaning of oikos, right? The household and what the importance of household. That was good because you're like, oh yeah, that's like totally forgotten nowadays.
So at this point that you guys are consuming all these materials,
mostly me.
Okay, you're so
her by proxy.
But you're bought into
One
it
flesh.
way before you're bought into it, right?
So we would have.
How did that happen?
I warmed up to it faster, but she like switched.
I made
faster.
it. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
so with him and his reading, he became more comfortable with it faster. Where I was just kind of still, I'm not so comfortable with this. I made the switch pretty quickly. I would say, you know, most of my material was YouTube and also just conversations with the one who reads fast. And, you know, after he'd read another book, I would always ask him and be like, okay, so what did you think of that one? Like, because I kind of wanted to be convinced, even though, like, I didn't think I would be. Because I would say that the first hurdle for me was, again, with me dropping dispensational super quickly. I realized that the way that God dealt with the Jews and the way that God deals with us is the same. So when I started hearing the initial argument of like, okay, well, Presbyterians often compare paedobaptism with circumcision.
Right.
And when I heard that argument being placed, it's like, okay, so this is why they circumcised. You know, they always pass it on to their children. It was, you know, they needed to circumcise their heart. So it wasn't like, oh, that's it. Now you're a Jew. It's like, well, no, they have to make the heart change as well. I started hearing all that stuff, and the Paedobaptist, like, view on the family was really influential for me. I connected with that a lot because their view on children just fit really well with just how my mind worked.
Everything else you believed.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the Reformed Baptist, I always recommend listening or reading to both sides of anything to get a really good. I'm not sure how many of them realize how inconsistent their theology is with how they treat their children. Because nobody treats their children. I mean, you know, obviously you teach your children that they need to believe and repent and all that stuff, but they don't treat them just like everybody else, even though they claim, they're just like everybody else.
They hold their children to Christian standards, even believing that they are not Christian at that time. So, so at least for me, it was a lot about the family stuff, and it was a lot of the viewpoint on children. And I would say, what was the other major thing for me? So, honestly, it was I disagreed with the Baptist viewpoint before I agreed with
I get that too. Yeah.
So, because I would hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, you know, my 5-year-old, you know, she said the prayer and, you know, she said that she wants to take communion and get baptized, but I just don't know if she's ready for that yet. I don't know if she realizes what a big commitment this is or if she can fully understand it. And I'm just like, it would always sit so like, not even just it would make me uncomfortable, like it would sit so badly with me because I'm like, why are you denying this child what she wants? What she wants,
what
like,
she feels like is her right.
She's like, she might not understand. She might not even understand what death in and of itself is at this point at 5 years old. But she believes as much as she can at this point in her time in her life. Why are you denying her the rights of a Christian.
Right.
And so I started hearing more, which, to be fair, not all Baptists feel that way.
Yeah.
My parents don't. My parents, I didn't realize how big of a thing that was in baptism, because my parents were always like, well, yeah, once you believed, you're baptized, like right then. There's no class. There's no.
Yeah, I didn't realize how prevalent that was.
I didn't realize
like
it was
delaying baptism and delaying communion for like how long some people think you should.
Like,
make
not
it
until
wait,
they're
like,
18. Not
right.
until, yeah.
Let's wait till you come back from college and see if you still have faith, kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
See, and I didn't know that was so prevalent, but once I started hearing more from Baptists and their viewpoint on baptism, I started disagreeing with them more and more and more. And then I felt like someone in a no man's land. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not Paedobaptist and I'm not Baptist, where do I fall then? It felt like I didn't really know what to think. So
Limbo.
Yeah,
Where do I
so
go?
with all of your studying of Paedobaptism,
You were probably a month before me.
Yeah.
Because I was working some things out. We were having a conversation on the drive down to church because we have a long drive and get all that talking done. And she's like, honestly, whenever you say that you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
So what was it for you then? What ended up becoming?
It was a compilation of things. One, so the growing just disillusionment with Baptists and how they talked about, and a lot of the assumptions that kind of underpin that idea, like, oh well, you can't. I remember one of the James White debates that I watched. You can't disciple a baby. They can't even talk. A baby can't be a disciple. Babies can't have faith. All this stuff that is demonstrably not true.
Right.
It's like it's like saying like, oh well, you can't teach a baby English.
Right.
It's like you teach
You
them
teach-
English.
That's literally
from the
what
day
you're
they're
doing.
born. Yeah.
Every baby is taught English.
You talk to a baby
By
and say,
virtue of having
hi,
English-speaking
like you
parents.
can't you disciple them.
Right.
Right. Well, and they even respond if they can't communicate perfectly. They
Yeah.
still respond to you, and that's actually Peter Leithart has some good lectures about that.
Well, and even in scripture, like John the Baptist recognizing Christ, like it was an infant, like he wasn't even born. How can you say a baby can't respond
And
know?
faith from mother's breast, all that stuff. Yeah.
So
what
more
else?
just seeing holes in the Baptist argument, that was kind of the beginning. All of the similarities to circumcision. A lot of trees have given their life for that topic. There's a lot of stuff out there about baptism and circumcision that are really, really, really explicit. And so for me, the biggest thing, and it's different for everybody, so was just the continuity of God's dealings with people.
Yeah.
And how the New Testament uses the Old Testament. Because the Baptist idea, even Reformed Baptist, there is a kind of big level of discontinuity just implicit in that idea. The New Covenant is entirely unlike anything that came before it. It's not like anything else.
Yeah.
Even though, so, the two, pillar, from what I understand, from what I read and listen to, the two pillars of the Baptist idea are everyone in the New Covenant saved. The New Covenant
Completely
equals regeneration kind of
Right.
thing. And the examples of people being baptized in the book of Acts where it specifically says repent first or believe first.
It's not a mixed covenant.
Right.
And everyone in the New Testament is believed and then we're baptized.
So for me, I should say two big things. One, it made sense of the warning passages for me.
Oh, yes,
that
that's a big thing.
I couldn't...
John 15 was huge for us.
John
That was
15.
the linchpin for
And
me.
honestly, that's probably the main thing I was forgetting, is that was probably where I made this switch.
John 15, Romans 11.
Yeah,
Book
putting
of
those
Hebrews.
passages in a covenantal mindset
It makes so much more
Because
sense.
if you're a
framework.
Calvinist, you can't make sense of those.
Right.
No.
Without being...
And that's
So
honestly...
you brought up that passage, your very first sermon here, Hebrews 10.
Yep. Right.
To call someone sanctified by the blood of the covenant is pretty explicit language.
Right.
And, I remember struggling with that passage when I was, studying Calvinism for the first time and finding some really, tortured explanations of that
Arminians
passages.
love that passage.
Right. And, I know James White says the he that sanctified is Jesus, which I don't... the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified, the he is Jesus, which I don't find very tenable at all in the context of the passage. So that was one big thing. It made a better sense of the warning passages.
Right.
Well,
in Douglas Wilson's book, he has a big thing about Romans 11.
Yeah,
where
I've heard him
you're actually on the olive tree,
right,
in some way, and you can be cut off because of unbelief.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did Jews get on the olive tree? They were born there. You know.
Right. They grew out of it.
Right.
And Doug even says in it was a recent lecture or something. I think it was at a Grace Agenda conference a couple of years ago. But he says like those who today believe and they're grafted in. But the children, like your children, or you have more children, right? Those are the branches that actually grow out already. Like you're in the tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how this happens.
So maybe more than two things. I had a lot of big things.
Yeah. So
it's a multi-layered argument.
The warning passages were big for me too. Kind of like you said, because you know, even when I was first talking about all the Calvinism stuff, the stuff that started to make me change my mind about that was when I would read verses that I used to be confused about, and under the new mindset that I was being told about made sense and they clicked to me. So talking about the baptism stuff, and he would mention, he's like, yeah, well, it's like the warning passages, and this is how they make sense of it. And I'm like,
ooh.
It's like putting a puzzle piece together.
Exactly. I'm like, those are things that I always just kind of like, it sounds bad to say that you would like avoid scripture, but yes, I would avoid it. Mm-hmm. Same way that I would avoid Romans 9 when I was an Arminian, all of that stuff. So that clicked. I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know totally. For us, you were the one that was listening to a podcast. And you were like, I think we should baptize our kids. And I was like, what in the world are you talking about?
And it was just like that for me.
And that's,
And then I listened to it, and it, like, tripped something in my mind. I was like, hold on a second. And I think in my mind, I thought, like, this would be really cool. Because I would be able to appreciate and fully take in Calvin, all these Dutch Reform guys I love, and, like, all this stuff. Because for so many years, I was kind of pushing away some of their stuff. It was like
me being somewhat okay with entertaining the idea made you feel like this isn't going to ruin my marriage if I do some investigation.
Yeah, and then I was like, I totally see it. I'm on board. And then you were like, hold on, I need to poke holes in it and see
because my personality is very much like I'm the list maker. Like everything has to fit together just so. So when I was listening to the podcast and they were talking about the warning passages and they when they went through all the stuff and I'm like, that makes sense. But now let me see if I can replicate. Like that's my personality. Let me see if I can like redo it and like it actually is what it sounded like and whatever. So when I started, I was like interested in. You started reading and doing research and you were like sold, like you would have baptized our kids just then. And I'm like, let's just slow down. Let's just make sure that we are sure because
rash decisions.
I don't want a lightning bolt coming for me.
That's kind of
that's kind of what I did. I didn't want because I had gotten to the point where I was leaning that way.
So you warmed up to the idea, but then I made a hard switch, and you were like, okay, hold on.
I don't want to change my mind to do something rash and then change my mind back the more I look into it, kind of thing.
Right.
Because people can be persuasive, but like I want to make sure like we actually do believe this.
Well, and for whatever reason,
it didn't take
it's a big deal. Like it is a big decision to.
Well, and like becoming a Calvinist, it is like forsaking a lot of what you were taught growing up. Yes. So in a sense, it's not like a different religion. But it almost feels like starting over.
Yep.
Yeah, and you don't want to dishonor your mother and father.
Yeah, like reinterpreting
the same way. Yeah, the same way that you reread the Bible under the Calvinist lens. Now you have to reread it underneath the Paedobaptist lens, and it starts to make sense.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, like I've always I said, it's a new palette of colors, right? It's just a whole new way. Now when you read the Psalms and stuff and you see children you're like, whoa, I get this now. This is a covenantal understanding of, God building his people through the generations or whatever.
And another huge thing for me was like having my soteriology fit with my covenant theology, fit with my eschatology, fit
when
with
it all starts to fit together.
Exactly. Yep. And there aren't any weird little things like offloading, like when they all actually make sense of each other and reinforce each other. That I was I'm good.
I certainly don't pretend to believe that I have everything figured out by any means, but
things fit better than they used to.
Things fit. Like the puzzle pieces are actually fitting together, and I don't feel like I have to break it up into these separate categories. So, exactly.
Yeah, and I think, Jake, you mentioned the mixed covenant thing. Yep. because most Reformed Baptists that I still talk to, that at least they were like maybe close to, you know, tipping over, that's something they still bring up. They're like, you know, James White's still in my mind. Like, what makes it new then if it's a mixed covenant? I just keep thinking, like, Jesus.
I was going to say,
there's
Jesus
a lot Jesus, the substance came. Like, there's so much that's better. Why is that the only thing that, like...
Well, women are included in
right, like, there's so much.
That was another big thing for me.
Yeah,
everything about the new covenant is more inclusive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Except for one of the biggest things about people's children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's more inclusive everywhere else, but your kids aren't in anymore.
Right, and you had
Julie,
talked about how, like, you know, you think about the early church, like all of the first Christians were Jews.
The new covenant didn't arrive in a vacuum. All the first Christians were Jewish. So that was probably, although I had a lot of big things, the biggest thing was probably, you know, it didn't arrive in a vacuum. There was theological lenses and redemptive history in the minds of all these people.
It's good.
So you have, you know, Adam represented more than just himself.
Yeah.
Noah represented more than just himself. His whole family was saved on the ark because of him.
It says that Noah was the last man with faith.
The saving of his family.
His whole family was saved.
That's
compared to baptism in 1 Peter 3. Them being
Yes.
saved on the the ark. Abraham, that and circumcision, the parallels are obvious.
Yeah.
You know, Moses.
He circumcised his kids because he had faith.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Moses, 1 Corinthians 10. We're all baptized, all our fathers baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. You know, so just the continuity of God's dealing with people with no abrogation explicitly stated anywhere.
No contra imperative, right? That's what Fesko said in his book, or counter imperative, right? He said in the new covenant, there's no counter imperative telling the people of God, okay, now we do not include kids. Now we do not. Only, or whatever. There's no counter imperative.
All of the first Jewish Christians would have immediately had.
I think that's what got me, was because you have Romans 4, and I think it's Galatians 3. Where all those who are of faith are children of Abraham, right? So there's your continuity. We're not just children of Peter or
when we
whatever.
sing that song like Father Abraham,
and I say that
as a Baptist,
I'm one of them. So are you, right?
Yeah.
In my dispensational churches, sing that song with kids too.
Yeah. Hundreds of kids at VBS for decades have sung, "They are children of Abraham." I'm one of them. So are you. But all of them are probably pagan with no faith.
It's so funny. One of our friends in Brooklyn grew up Jewish, and she went to Baptist churches, never like really, I don't know, believed or understood. Like she just kind of went because her friends invited her, like all through high school and stuff. And it wasn't until she went to a Presbyterian church who was a newly, like they were just converting in, like from Baptist to Presbyterian. And so they were going through like different books. I think Bonson was one of them. Anyway, so they were going through like a lot of the theology,
just basic reform stuff.
And like she was attending at that time and like hearing the theology being taught. And she was like, when they started talking about covenant theology and kids being included into the covenant, I bought in and I believed it because
makes sense.
Because as a Jew, I'm sitting here thinking, like, why would, like, that's not good. I want my kids to be Jewish if they're included. If I become a Christian, my kids aren't included. That's not good for me. I don't want that.
Yeah, how could Jesus come and make it better, but now my kids aren't here? Like, my kids aren't included.
So when she got that, then she was like, I'm Christian then. Like, yes. And then obviously she started learning what that actually entailed. But it's funny how that can actually be a barrier for some Jews.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so like I never understood the power of the Acts 2 argument at first. The promises for you and for your children.
Right.
Until I started thinking, okay, how would they have heard it?
Exactly.
Yes.
They had, a faithful Jew has the entire Old Testament with the things being a certain way for thousands of years. They hear the promises for you and for your children.
Right.
You think that just means like generic, obscure posterity that are of a mature age? That's not what they would have thought that meant.
No.
You know?
Well, no, they would have had Genesis 17 in their mind because they would have studied their patriarchs, and that's exactly what God told Abraham. Right. Circumcise, yourself and your children and those in your household, and this will be a sign of the covenant forever.
Yeah, and even taking the Baptist understanding of what baptism is, and reading what Romans 4 says about Abraham's circumcision. He received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness he had by faith.
Yeah,
Abraham was a credo circumcision.
Right.
Right.
But that didn't change
Right. Well, yeah,
You know?
I can't remember who it was we listened to.
First generation.
First generation, right? And that's why if you're a head of a family, your family is not Christian, and you're coming to church and becoming members, you receive the sign. You know, it's not...
Right.
Paedobaptists aren't only kid Baptists, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're Credobaptist and Paedo. It's both. It's believer
No one disagrees
and...
with Credobaptist.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
nobody says...
No one disagrees with that.
Right.
So the Book of Acts is primarily about conversions and the faith going to people who haven't.
Yeah. First
That was the point. That was the
If you
point
had
of the book.
if you had had a
It was
missionary book in
evangelism.
the Old Testament with go and circumcise the nations in the name of the God of Israel, it would have been primarily believer circumcisions if that's what the book was focused on. So
I'm sure all the Egyptians that left with the Israelites were circumcised.
right.
Yeah.
They would have had to be, I guess. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, and that coupled with the early church controversy recorded in Acts of whether Gentiles should be circumcised. Like, well, you think that just included the people that believed that they had this radical change of who circumcision was to be given to without saying anything. So,
like, not
that
only
would have
was there
included
no-
all of their children too. So they still had this covenantal federal household view of things. Right.
The oikos mindset.
And
The Philippian jailer,
Hebrew
right?
word for household. For
It is, yeah. Oikos, household.
And so, like, not only was there no explicit piece of the New Testament that says, oh, well, now your kids are included. If anything, you just have exactly the opposite, because you have, all the times of Jesus, like, especially, like, let the little children come to me. It says that they brought infants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said the kingdom of heaven belongs to those such as these.
Yeah.
And they're infants,
Yeah.
So
So this is the Baptist thing too, because I remember saying this and believing this. We want our adults to have childlike faith, but a
child can't have faith.
Yes,
But a child has to have adult-like faith.
yes.
What does that? That's so backwards.
You have to have faith
that's
like
what
this
drives
group of
me
people
nuts.
that can't really have it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so true.
And then to implant those kind of doubts in your children, and Jesus even said it would be far better for you to throw a millstone around your neck than to cause such harm to
chuck you
these
into the
children,
sea.
to these people. And so you just think, not only is it not correct, but it's actually quite scary to believe
thank
and
goodness.
teach some of those things.
Thank goodness, my parents weren't the type that
Yeah,
thought that I had
we
to
didn't
be
have Baptist parents
no.
like that constantly just instilled
And honest-
doubt.
yeah, no, I
wait
wasn't
till you're
crazy
50.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Like
Yeah.
I had a blessing of inconsistent parents.
Yes.
Kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, a good kind of inconsistent. Because we're
Don't
straight
you
up
love
Baptists.
the good kind of inconsistent?
Yeah, we
Yes.
love it, and
It's a
that's
grace.
and because they're being biblical.
Yeah.
They just they're not there or whatever, and that's fine. But my parents prayed with me every single day. They read the Bible to me and
They
taught me
required
the
you to
faith.
obey.
Yeah, they completely treated me like a covenant kid, and that's
same.
so.
Yep. And that's the thing is you see all these Baptist parents saying oh well, my kid doesn't have the right amount of faith yet, and it's but Jesus himself said that that's the right kind of faith to have.
Yeah.
Right.
It's more innocent, it's less
more
skeptical.
innocent. It's less,
Yeah, for sure.
And I myself, so it's interesting. I was baptized as an infant. My father came.
Biological father.
My biological father he was a Wesleyan.
Okay.
But if he had it his way, he probably would have been Episcopalian. And he baptized me. He also believed in baptism by immersion, so I was dunked. So I was dunked as an infant, which is
Wow. All right.
I didn't know this until
That's
I was
unique.
older. Yeah, I didn't know this until I was older.
Really?
Yeah, my mom didn't have that
never
opinion.
bought into it, so.
Yeah, my mom didn't have that opinion, so she wouldn't. But she, called
care to
it.
tell
She
you.
called it a dedication in my baby book.
That's so
Oh,
funny.
that's funny.
So it was funny. So I wasn't baptized until I was 11.
Second one.
My second baptism that I didn't know was my second baptism, but so I was I guess my mom says that I said the prayer and had faith when I was 4. I don't remember a time when I did not. So that's another thing that kind of changed that changed our minds.
Yeah, on
that.
a personal level, it's, neither one of us ever remembering a time not believing also makes, the practical argument for it stronger.
Yeah.
So
Because,
where you have
even...
that conversion that Paul Paul on the
Right.
road to like we
Right.
don't have that.
Yeah.
You know.
And praise God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you want for
Yes.
your kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, and as much as I love Puritans, that's an error I believe that they emphasize too much, leading all the way to the Second Great Awakening, was this emphasis on just a personal
Conversion
experience.
Yes.
The conversion
Yeah.
experience, where you radically know that you've been born again or whatever. But yeah, it's
It's emotionalism in a lot of senses.
individualistic, big time. But that's your story too, right? You don't
Yeah,
remember
I
a
don't
time-
ever remember not
Yeah.
thinking I was a Christian and loving Jesus. Like, there were certain times when I understood greater,
Yeah.
heights of my faith, and like there was sanctification and all that kind of stuff. But all the way back, as far as I can remember, like I knew I was a Christian, and I knew I loved Jesus, and I was part of
Yeah.
his family.
Right.
Yeah, and you go through different, evolutions in your life where you come to greater understanding. Like, I would say I came to a much greater understanding of my Christian faith when I was a teenager, younger teen, tween teen, around that age. But then, I came to an even greater understanding when we started dating and going over, you go through these evolutions where you learn more. But it doesn't mean that I became a Christian as a teenager because I didn't understand something I did before. No, I always had faith.
Yeah.
And just on a practical level, that's something that's interesting with the whole, like you said, inconsistent parents in a biblical way.
Well, you're like, what do you do with that?
My parents, my dad, stepfather, he bugged me for years to get baptized. He said, when are you going to get baptized? Like, you believe, right? When are you going to get baptized? He for years and years and years. I, like you have stated, I just didn't want to be up in front of people, so I kept saying no, like, I don't want to do it. And when I was 11, my younger brother agreed to be baptized because he had recently, come to the faith. My dad's like, hey, you should too. So I did, mostly to appease, not to have to hear about it anymore.
Right.
So, and that's the other thing that kind of threw a kink in the whole an outward expression of an inward faith, because I didn't actually want to do it of my own accord. So at that point, like, was it really a baptism then if I wasn't expressing my own...
And how do you quantify that?
Exactly. And
What's
like...
the stat? Like, the average Southern Baptist gets baptized like 2.8 times or something?
Right.
Yeah.
Once when they're a kid, once as a teenager, and then once as like an adult when it really takes,
Right,
Yeah.
because what's the real one? And like the same thing if it's supposed to be an outward expression. All of the like inconsistencies in Baptist ideology. If it's supposed to be an outward expression, what if it's just you and the person baptizing you in the middle of a forest? If a tree falls in a forest and doesn't make a sound, if there's no one there to witness it, is it an outward expression? You know what I mean? That's where you get the...
Those questions.
What does it take for it to be a baptism?
Yeah.
Right.
Does there need to be witnesses?
Yeah. When you make it your act and not God's act,
Right,
it
exactly.
completely changes.
I can remember being on Facebook, like, right around this time when we were kind of coming into this, like, new way of seeing baptism. And I don't even know who it was, but I remember very vividly, someone's kid was just baptized. And, of course, it was this whole long, sappy post about how proud they were of their child's decision.
Yes.
And how they were just so happy that their child was finally, like, seeing... And it was a whole thing. And I can remember... And I think they were Reformed Baptist. And thinking, like, you don't believe this was your child's choice. Like, you believe God predestined your child. So why are you now making it all, like, your child's salvation all about
Them.
your child's decision right now in this like, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Felt like I was taking crazy pills.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that's another conversation. Like, what was it that James White said about the whole his idea on like it being a marriage, and what you thought that I said that was profound? That
Yes, it was the
influenced you?
debate with it was the debate with Reverend Dr. Strawbridge, and he had Greg Strawbridge had compared it to a baptism to like a marriage ceremony,
Right.
and this. It doesn't guarantee a good marriage or a marriage that will last or a faithful marriage. He's like, but there is something, binding about baptism. And, James White said, well, I wrote my own wedding vows, and if they were, my wedding vows were, given to me as a baby before I could even remember, I'd probably think they were less important. And you had said, baptism is God's vow to you, not your vow to God.
Right.
Which
this was during the
was
time
probably
when
one
you
of
were
the deepest things I've ever heard you say. To be perfectly
So
honest.
you were this was still when you
Nice.
were like in your kind of like deciding phase, and I
Yeah, I
had
was
already
still
made
kind
up
of
my
waffling
mind.
about
So when you had like said that, they're like, oh well, they compared it to like a marriage vow. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's what he's missing. It's not a vow to each other. It's God's vow
Yes.
to you.
Yep.
That's why you give it to them as an infant, because God promised godly.
Yeah.
See,
I mean,
that's
And-
it's God's vow to you.
And James White would believe that. He would agree, like his soteriology would agree with everything you just
his
said.
Baptist it's just inconsistent from his
Yeah.
the rest
Yep.
of his
So,
view.
yeah.
And that's the disconnect that we just
Him
keep
and Jeff
talking
Durbin
about.
at the same time just need to come out as pedo.
Well, he became post-mill, so
That's what I'm
there's
saying.
hope.
Like they're in together now. If they both just come out right away
Mm-hmm.
and just are like,
I don't see that ever happening.
I don't either. But that would be
that would cause an avalanche.
That would be interesting.
yes, it
in
would.
that church, man.
Yeah, well, just their following in general. Anyway,
Yeah.
it would be cataclysmic to say the
I mean,
least.
there's a lot of overlap with like the Christ Church, Douglas Wilson fans,
Yeah.
and like fans of them.
Yeah,
Yep.
So
no, it's true.
they have a lot of
They have
similar influence.
support. They have plenty of support.
No, yeah, no,
And
it's true.
for the record, we're not saying every Reformed Baptist is like a
Is
piece
the
of
same
poop
even.
and are stupid
or
and
even
dumb
the
and-
same, right?
Right.
Because there are very different views or attitudes towards
Yes.
pedos
Right,
between,
yes.
let's say, James White and Jeff Durbin and Mark Dever and some of the
Oh,
Nine Marks
goodness.
crowd,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you have a woke, you can't baptize anyone until they're 18.
If
Yeah.
then,
Right.
And Paedobaptists are not even really baptized because that's not a real baptism.
Yeah.
That's what they hold. I don't think Jeff and James would. I don't think they're that position. But they do a lot of ministry together, like you just said, with,
Yeah.
Right.
with all of them.
I'm pretty sure for their church membership though, they require rebaptism though.
Well,
I think.
in their understanding, like
Right.
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Well,
So,
I mean, like the type of Reformed Baptist we were was very much, conversion baptism, like on the, you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
very,
yeah,
so that at least was consistent in some type of way.
But yeah, so there was a lot of big pillars, and then
Yeah.
there's little things.
Yeah.
So, believers' baptism doesn't protect the sacraments more than paedobaptism does.
No, it doesn't.
We're told to expect false converts. We're told there will be false converts.
right.
And if you
True.
follow the practice of immediate baptism upon profession, baptizing false converts is kind of part of the design.
Kind of bound to
at
happen.
that point. So
and
it
we
doesn't
all know
even
someone who
right.
is in
Yeah,
that situation. Like
true.
we all
Yeah.
know those Christians
Oh,
who
absolutely.
are, I say Christians, but like who are baptized, and we all know they're not walking with the Lord right now.
Yeah.
For sure.
Maybe like some old pastors we know.
I know a few.
more than
Oh,
one
right.
actually.
I was baptized by an apostate. Well, the second baptism, I was baptized by an apostate. So
Oh, jeez.
for my second baptism.
Do we know that for
It's
sure?
okay because
Do we know that for sure?
Yes.
Was that confirmed?
All
yeah.
right. Well, anyway,
that's bonus content.
No.
Yeah, whenever we get the
content.
Patreon up,
Yeah,
that'll
behind
be
the paywall.
Yeah.
Yeah, behind the paywall, exactly.
Then you get all the juicy gossip.
All right. Well, Eryn and Jake, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story.
Is there anything that like you just want to get out that you didn't feel like you got to?
Oh yeah, it's good.
I mean, conversations go on forever if you wanted
Yeah.
them to.
Yeah,
so
if you want
true.
them to. What was?
But nothing on your mind right
But
now.
like, will you
oh,
lay in bed tonight thinking, "I wish I would have said that. That would have changed everyone's mind."
I'll just bring up probably a couple just random verses. 1 Corinthians 7:14.
Yep.
Again, like I said,
Kids
my
are
Greek
sanctified.
knowledge is paper thin, but look up that word
For
used
sanctified.
for holy
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
kids
Yeah.
and how it's used elsewhere. And
Okay.
then read a commentary from a Baptist explain what it means.
Yeah.
It's very strained, it's very forced. I read John Gill a lot,
Okay.
who's a Reformed Baptist, and he was trying to make it, there was a conversation about like legitimate and illegitimate children, which really doesn't make
Interesting.
any sense. And having a non-Christian spouse doesn't make your child illegitimate. Like nobody,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a
That's a
big
good
one.
one.
That passage not being able to really explain, and also the Great Commission.
Okay.
Baptism begins discipleship,
Yes.
and
Not the other way around.
right.
Yeah.
Baptism comes first. Teaching them to obey whatsoever I have commanded you comes second. And it's like the whole, is your child a student of the English language thing, or whatever language you speak, you know, by virtue of, you know, hopefully, if you make it an important thing, they are a disciple by being in a Christian family.
Right.
And we know throughout the Gospels and throughout the New Testament, to be a disciple doesn't automatically mean a saved person.
Yeah.
Right.
You
It just
know,
means you're learning.
Judas.
Right. You know, John
being
6
taught.
says, many of his disciples walked with him no more. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if you have a Christian child and it's important to you to raise them as Christian children, they're a disciple by virtue of,
Right.
you know, being a Christian child.
Right.
So,
Good.
That's good.
Sweet.
Helpful.
Yeah. That it?
yeah, I think I'll probably think of something, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, awesome. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was enlightening for you, and
If you guys have questions, we can have them back.
drop them in the comments.
Yeah.
All right, we'll log them.
We could do a
And-
Q&A.
Yeah, we could bring them back for a Q&A.
That
That'd
could
be
be
fun.
fun.
And
I'll come back.
maybe even we do it live.
I don't know if I'm okay with that.
as
I
long
don't
as
do
don't
well
have
with
to
that
see
kind of stress.
myself, like I said, I'll be okay.
No, it's fine. Well, the screen will be that way, Jake. We're good. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Loved it. And thank you guys for watching. Again, like the video, subscribe, and help keep this stuff going out.
Yep.
Until next time, this is the Reformed Reset.
But on the basis of grace and on the finished work of Jesus Christ, the project is back in force, and the destiny of a new transformed world is assured.